Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Tech. My name is Neda Kaizumi, your host, and with us we are honored to have Mr. Sebastian Hallensleben, a prominent figure in the global AI ecosystem and currently chair of the OECD Working Party on AI Governance. With a rich career spanning engineering, innovation, ethics, and standardization, Sebastian has become a vital voice in advocating for responsible and trustworthy AI. His work is pivotal in guiding both public and private sector AI strategies towards sustainability, transparency, and real-world impact. In this episode, we'll explore his journey into AI, the responsibilities of global leadership and standard setting in the strategic edge AI can offer organizations when deployed thoughtfully. Stay tuned as we unpack the intersection of ethics, governance, and innovation. Welcome to the show, Sebastian.
Thank you, Neda, for having me here.
Let's just start with your background. Can you take us back to the early stages of your career? What initially drew you to engineering and system thinking, and how did you find that influencing to your future journey in AI?
Yeah, I started out as a physicist, and that in turn was motivated by a very early kind of childhood interest in astronomy. And upon discovering that, at least at the time, it wasn't possible to take an astronomy course at university directly, you had to study physics first. And so I ended up studying physics and sticking with it. And over time, I went through the course. I did a PhD in physics, really enjoyed it. But it was a situation or a time, and I think the situation is still quite similar, where the PhD is the golden time, where you can spend pretty much all of your time doing research and writing about it. And you spend very little of your time trying to pull in funding, to administer funding, to scope future projects. And even though the group I was in was actually very good at this, I thought, well, that's maybe not the path I want to take. So I went into industry. I worked in telecoms for a while, in software engineering. I worked in financial services, coding trading systems, amongst others. And as you do, you migrate from purely technical to management roles. And in my case, many situations where this management consisted of resolving conflicts, of finding shared language between teams and stakeholders that didn't see eye to eye, that didn't really know how to have a constructive conversation. And that over time became the focus of my work, with policy development dialogues for research, with kind of program development dialogues between academia, industry, and society, with project development dialogues between Europe and African stakeholders. And I didn't know it at the time, but it kind of all prepared me for chairing a standardization committee that is, above all, about finding consensus, building bridges between people who speak different languages, not just linguistically, but also mindset-wise. And yeah, there I am.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I think your journey is a dream of every young people, like starting from physics and astronomy, ending up to where you are, and on the way you've been doing coding for trading industry. It's extremely exciting. But was it a moment that you decided this is my turning point, that I'm going to dedicate only on AI? Or did it just happen like as you described in a flow?
The AI turning point was probably the most conscious turning point. Previously, usually people around me realized what I was good at and told me and said, oh, Sebastian, you should be doing this or that. And why don't you make peace here or there? But in the case of AI, I was actually at VDE, the German Engineering Association at the time, in charge of developing their digital strategy. And through a relatively broad search process, it emerged unsurprisingly, that certain aspects of AI would be important topics. So that was around 2018, identifying operationalizing AI trustworthiness. That was number one. The second was measuring AI quality. And number three was the impact of generative AI. So even then, I was already intrigued and also concerned by the prospect of Gen AI faking everything and everyone and doing so at scale. So that was the result of a relatively structured search process in the context of the organization I was working for at the time.
Absolutely, and that's also exciting. When you first got invited as chair for the AI committee and OECD, what was your reaction? How long did you take to decide on this?
Well, in the case of standardization, it was actually unusually a competitive process. So I was put forward by my organization, and because AI, even then, 2019, was such a hot topic, it was not possible for the various stakeholders across Europe to quietly agree on a chair for the new committee and then just appoint that person. So in the kickoff meeting, there were 3 candidates and we had to present, and there was a secret vote. It took me a little while when the outcome of the voting was announced to realize, I think I won this one. I only realized when one of the other candidates just shouted over and very, very nicely congratulated me. And I thought, well, that probably means I won. Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah, reflecting on the numbers, they were just announced. Yeah, that's true. But as I said, it's relatively unusual in standardization because it is all so consensus oriented. It's quite rare that there is a competitive vote for any of the roles.
I serve in a national committee, so I understand how it is. What has it been like to chair the OECD Working Party on AI governance? Like, what are the unique challenges and advantages that you see coming to shape the global AI policy from your point of view?
So the OECD is structured quite differently. So I'm actually co-chairing one of the expert groups, the expert group on AI risk and accountability, that worked on creating classification frameworks and also on creating a certain base level for AI governance at the international level. There is an interesting interplay between 3 stakeholders. There are the expert groups. Then there is the OECD Secretariat that, for the topic of AI, is very, very capable and has excellent people who are also able not just to facilitate a process, but also to accompany it content-wise. And then there is the political level. So strictly speaking, the actual working party for AI governance consists of the representatives of the member states' governments, and they have to approve the scope of work that is undertaken, and they also have to approve, again, the final outcome before it is published. And the Secretariat is very, very good at juggling these 3 different players. So the experts who discuss freely, who generate input, who generate ideas, the Secretariat who's kind of structuring all that and putting it into kind of a consistent OECD-like language. And then also the political level to figure out, well, where are the touch points where you kind of need to remind the political level, yeah, this is what we're doing, this is the direction it's going in, there's not going to be any surprises. And that worked really, really well. But I have to say credit to the Secretariat for managing that in a really, really good way. So to me, this is quite inspirational for how international governmental organizations can work and their effectiveness and efficiency, it's not like that everywhere.
Absolutely, and it's so amazing. From your experience working on standards and governance, where do you see AI delivering the most value today? And where are the biggest pitfalls or limitations that organizations often overlook?
I would like organizations to have a lot more courage in demanding good AI, and also to have a lot more courage in defining what good actually means. So right now, we're in a situation where there are very big promises by AI vendors. There is anecdotal evidence, quotes unquote, from vendors, but there is almost no hard data whether AI really leads to productivity improvements or whether it really leads to efficiency gains or cost savings or whatever else the promise is. There are also very few, almost no ways for companies that want to use AI to compare different products. So if you're a company that wants to buy a customer service chatbot solution because it kind of improves their customer service interface, or they want to reduce their call center cost, or whatever the motivation is, they can put out a request for quotation. They'll get 3, 4, 5 offers in, but there is no way to even set the criteria, let alone test those criteria. And that situation was one of my main motivations for recently changing one of my hats, moving away from BDE and joining Rizzaro as a chief trust officer. Rizzaro is a company that tests AI, but not in the sense of we need a tick in the box for compliance purposes, but we need to know what can AI do and what can it not do. Kind of what are the true capabilities of an AI solution? And I realized quite early on that we missed, or we lack even the standards to describe AI quality. We have a fairly mature standards world now around AI trustworthiness, and the harmonized standards for the AI Act will be kind of the crowning centerpiece of that world. But we have almost nothing to describe the quality, the performance of an AI solution at a use case level. We have low-level technical benchmarks, but we have very little at a use case level. For example, use case being a customer support chat service. And so going back to your question, I would encourage companies to have the courage to ask, to demand, to say, well, I'm not going to spend hundreds or millions of euros just on the promise of a vendor that an AI system will be awesome, and next week it'll be even more awesome, and the week after it'll replace everyone. But as a company, I'm going to be just as critical and demanding as I am with other products. If I buy a bunch of cars for my sales team, I'm demanding, I want to know about fuel consumption, about price, about range, about whatever else. If I buy a bunch of laptops for my staff, I want to know hard technical data of what they're capable of and how secure they are, and how many times you can drop them before they're destroyed, and so on. So I really want companies to have the same demanding attitude, or the same courage to demand quality and evidence of quality as they have with any other non-AI product.
Thank you for sharing that. That brought me to an area out of the box, actually not including the AI podcast question, but I have two reflections on that. I think the first one is that when a leadership team comes together, they kind of outsource AI tools to IT directors or chief technology officer or something like that. And that's why probably they are not like hands-on like other matters. And that's probably one of the reasons that companies ask for KPI less than other things. That's my personal reflection. And also, I think it's kind of awareness that we're still working on the awareness part to what AI is and how it can contribute. So maybe that can be strength. One thing I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned that recently you have been appointed as Chief Trust Officer, which kind of a total new term for me, but I think it's quite interesting. And that brings me to like responsible AI, if I can translate that correctly. But responsible AI is a term that we hear often, as you also have been appointed as Chief Trust Officer. In your view, what are the most practical steps organizations can take to ensure AI systems are transparent, accountable, and aligned with human values?
I can kind of build on what I said earlier in terms of encouraging companies to demand quality. We are traditionally used to thinking in silos. So there are people in a company who want AI to do certain things. For example, be an efficient and capable customer chatbot. There are other teams in a company that, from compliance, from legal, from governance, who want that AI system not to do certain things, not to discriminate, not to have any security holes, not to fall over in unexpected scenarios. And then you have the teams in a company who are the technical teams, the IT departments, who are in charge of getting it all up and running, connecting it to their internal systems, and so on. And traditionally, these three teams run their own parallel processes. And as you say, the people on the operational, on the business side, they tend to have a very different level of knowledge compared to the governance, and then again compared to the technical people. And one of the working hypotheses that we developed in Rizzaro, the company I joined as Chief Trust Officer, was that we must create a shared language. We need to create a shared language for what quality actually means, so that the business people can understand it, governance people can understand it, and it can also be mapped to technical tests. And the whole thing has to be use case specific, because otherwise you can't talk about quality in a generic way. It has to be specific to a chatbot or to a face recognition system or to whatever else. As you do that, and you kind of write down what do we actually mean by quality, what are the indicators of quality, you realize that 2/3 of those are identical to what used to be called trustworthiness. So things like avoiding bias, or at least making bias transparent, record keeping, version control of data that goes into the system, transparency of configuration and of outputs, privacy protection, data protection. So most of the indicators there are at the same time trustworthiness indicators. And that takes me to a point of saying, well, there's another silo that we need to break up. We don't just have the silos between business, governance, technical. We also have these silos between quality people or quality perspective and trustworthiness perspective. Ultimately, taking both of these seriously has so much overlap in the things you look at and the things you test that it does not make sense to keep them separate. And so, to me, a big goal is to make sure that there's one unified way of looking at, well, we call it quality, but we kind of subsume trustworthiness under it as well. And that would be my greatest wish, or maybe the biggest advice to companies, to take that leap and say, yeah, let's assess, well, firstly, let's assess AI. and have the courage to demand kind of certain evidence. And secondly, let's assess AI in a holistic way, both in terms of the dimensions we look at and in terms of the teams that are involved from within a company.
Absolutely. Actually, some companies actually do. Like Microsoft, I know that they are assessing this based on effectivity and then replace people to somewhere else. My own company, Advania, together with the management team, trying to put KPI for next year. So many leaders are seeing this as a source of competitive advantage, and they are trying to do something with it. But what are your thoughts on that perspective? And do you believe responsible AI can enhance competitive edge rather than constrain it?
Yes, very much so. I think it's a false and quite harmful dichotomy to say, oh, if we look closely at what AI is actually doing, this hampers innovation. I would argue it's exactly the opposite way around. If we look closely what AI is doing, if we are able to test what AI is doing and ideally automate those tests and make them good and reliable and meaningful, those tests generate feedback, and without feedback, you can't have innovation. So that capability to test allows you to have tight and effective innovation cycles. And secondly, if you're able to test AI, it generates market transparency. So it enables you to compare products. So that creates true competition in the market, which again is one of the prerequisites or one of the drivers of innovation. Right now, there is no market transparency for AI solutions. There's a bit of transparency kind of on the low level, comparing one LLM against another, although you can debate the validity of some of the benchmarks. But on the level of AI solutions, even if I mentioned chatbots as an example, you can also use coding agents or kind of AI coding assistants as an example. There is no transparency in the market on which one is better in a given scenario. And so I would argue valid or meaningful quality metrics and trustworthiness metrics and automated testing are helping innovation in major ways. And I would argue that the whole debate around, does the AI Act hamper innovation, is a side issue. Yes, of course, having to document certain things creates overheads for companies, in particular for small companies that don't have a kind of a ready-made compliance department to spring into action. And I think there are aspects that can be improved and be made more efficient. But the basic notion that the AI Act demands transparency, it basically demands a certain level of due diligence in using your AI. That should be a matter of course. Companies should be doing that anyway in order to reap maximum benefit from AI and not just see it as an extra burden.
Totally. And I think, again, back to the level of maturity, I see some customers, they really have a well-defined AI strategy. But at the other hand, when we talk about AI management system and, transparency and all those things, there is a certain skepticism. So you're not sure how to offer that. In your opinion, what practical advice we can offer to those people who want to implement AI management system? And what are the key building blocks here?
Companies need to be clear when they talk about AI governance. They need to be clear whether they talk about improving their organization's capability to handle AI, or whether they are talking about assessing a product, either their own product that they are putting on the market or products that they are considering buying. And the AI Act is mostly concerned with the product. Yes, it kind of spills over into deployers and providers as well, but the starting point is a product perspective. Whereas standards such as the ISO IEC 42001 mainly take an organization perspective. So they are about improving the way the organizations handle AI, or making the organization capable of handling AI in a responsible way. So the question that arises for companies is, well, which angle do we come from? Do we come from both? Because, I mean, 42001 is something that everyone says, and maybe we already have an ISO 9001 certification, or do we come from the product perspective? I would argue that companies should at least consider both perspectives. On a product side, they might not be able to avoid it if they are in high-risk applications. If they're not in high-risk applications, then the AI Act doesn't really impose many obligations at all. If they are using AI quite broadly, then the organization perspective is really important. So it's hard to give general advice. It's more, well, my cross-cutting advice would be to be clear on what exactly are we managing, or what exactly are we optimizing, and is that what we want to optimize?
Yeah. On top of that, I think the landscape of AI standards seems to be evolving rapidly. I mean, the list that you showed in Stavanger, how many key AI-related standards exist today, and how should companies regulate it? Maybe you can walk us through that a little bit, of the number of the standards that exist, and the prioritization for the companies, how they should do that.
From the AI Act, we have a standardization request that lists 10 different items, and that really responds to Articles 8 to 15 in the AI Act. The way that we structure the standards combines some of those items, so it's not a one-to-one mapping. But so overall, there are around 5 to 6, let's say, core standards that will be the most important ones. But of course, they reference other standards, both European and international. So the total body of standards that is relevant and might need to be looked at is well into double digits. So one of the major decisions in Stavanger, the most recent JTC 21 plenary, was, well, we need something like a quick start guide for a company who maybe has never been involved with AI standards before, who might not even have been involved with any other harmonized standards before, and that just sees this big pack of standards written in a language that is not maybe a little bit unusual, and kind of not what you would expect or hope if you've never seen a standard before. And so we are now in a process of preparing such a quick start guide. The exact name is still to be defined, but some first document that explains to companies, well, how do those AI standards all hang together? Where do I start? What do I need to consider first? How do I kind of attack this whole thing? And I think that was a very, very important realization and important step to make it useful.
Thank you for sharing that. Given your international experience, how aligned or misaligned are different countries and regions when it comes to AI governance? What should we be watching closely for the next few years?
I think it's fair to say that there is a certain difference in mindset between Europe and the US. And that difference in mindset does also to some extent reflect in the mindset of companies who are either kind of based or centered in the US or based or centered in Europe. The European mindset is more along the lines of, well, we need clear requirements, they have to be measurable, and they have to be enforceable. And that's what makes a standard that goes along with a piece of regulation like the AI Act. The US mindset is more towards, well, we assume a company wants to do the right thing, they just don't know how. So a standard is really a way of capturing best practice, which can then be followed by companies. This is very broad brush, obviously, but the tension between those two mindsets is apparent in standardization in various places, not just in JTC 21. If we go into more fine-grained details between countries, it becomes quite hard to point out such broad patterns. I mean, there are countries who contribute a lot of content. There are other countries who focus on analyzing content written by others and who might invest much more time in providing detailed feedback. So both roles complement each other quite well, actually. There are stakeholders that want to keep standards as lightweight as possible. There are other stakeholders who want to keep them very stringent, maybe even hoping to fix some perceived oversights in the AI Act, which of course we cannot do in standardization. Yeah, but that's as far as I could go in describing differences between countries, I think.
Yeah, but that's both interesting and inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. On a more personal note, together with my Harvard colleagues, we are working on a project that uses AI to help reduce school shooting. What we're doing is to capture data for the last 60 years, analyzing and defining some patterns, and then doing a live data monitoring to match the pattern with the coming data. This is my own project that I have my heart to save the kids in future. What do you think from your perspective on AI governance? What advices do you have for us? And that's actually the basic why I initiated this podcast, to raise awareness on using AI for social good.
I really like the use case, I have to say. I mean, it's sad that it's necessary, but I really like the use of AI. It presents some interesting challenges, I think, because you have very limited training data. Fortunately, there's only even in the US, a relatively small number of school shootings. And so it's a similar situation to using AI in many other safety critical industries, monitoring a chemical plant, for example, or a nuclear plant, where you can't hope for the plant to blow up 1,000 times to collect training data, but where you have to work on a data sparse way. And I actually believe that having to work with sparse data is one of the biggest drivers of innovation. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but anyone can do AI on masses of data, but doing AI on small amounts of data is the real skill, and I think one of the frontiers. Yeah.
Good. I just want to highlight something that how small do you think this amount of data is?
Well, across, I assume the US versus Europe is probably a factor of 10, but across Europe for the last 60 years, I would have thought there's maybe. So across the US, I think there's one incident per month or so, depending on where you draw the line, 1 to 2 incidents per month. No, not even that.
We have over 10,000 lines, unfortunately, and the approximate, like the average school shooting in US is over 110 cases every year, and that's unfortunate.
So one every 3 days, basically.
Yeah. And that not all of them comes to media, or not at least international media, but there are a lot of them, which I was shocked when I started this study at all.
Yeah. That is, I didn't realize it's that bad.
Yeah, it is.
Do you also have a way of including near misses?
Unfortunately, that data is not available, but we are trying to create a system to collect that data from now on and to see if that works or not.
Right. Interesting.
But even if we manage to save one school for the entire life that we have, I think we still have done something.
And is that generating a warning to a school, or is it generating signals that a certain individual might be a risk to their peers?
What we're trying to do is to generate notification to both local authorities like sheriff and all those police that are around the school, local security, school administration, and school kids. But what we're struggling now that like you have the grade 3, not all of them are in the same class. Maybe they choose different subjects. So it's really a big challenge to put notification threshold that where it has to go. Is it like a class based? Is it like location based? And then how you can identify the location. So that's the most challenging part for now.
Fingers crossed tightly. I think that's an excellent use case. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your advice. If you had unlimited resources like time, funding, and global support, what AI-related project or initiative would you pursue and why?
One thing that I find quite frustrating is that the vast majority of investment in AI goes into the current generation of foundation models. And I'm strongly convinced that technologically and even philosophically and conceptually, this is a cul-de-sac. We will not be able to remove hallucinations from LLMs because it's inherent in the way that they operate. It's inherent in the notion of, well, we think that statistical prevalence in training data somehow equates reality or even truth. And it's also a cul-de-sac because it reinvents the wheel again and again. So if you ask an LLM, what happens if I drop a glass? Then, yeah, the LLM has lots of training data to figure out what happens and may well come with the right prediction. It falls at such and such speed, and then it hits the ground, and then it shatters. But it seems such a woefully inefficient way of generating that prediction compared to, yeah, here's Newton's law of gravity. It's been around for several hundred years. And you come to exactly the same prediction with a tiny fraction of the cost. So the knowledge that is compressed into the laws of physics, and that's where I'm kind of feeling that I'm returning to my roots to some extent, the knowledge that's compressed into this tiny set of laws of physics that probably fit into a few megabytes. So it's a minuscule fraction compared to the size of a foundation model, and maybe a bit more if you include the knowledge in the other natural sciences and medicine and so on. But that is really a highly compressed, cleaned body of knowledge, including controversy where there are uncertainties, but even those are kind of tightly compressed and summarized. And LLMs just don't make use of that. And so if I had unlimited resources, I would love to break open that cul-de-sac and say, well, let's look at uses of AI in that way. And the second, if I've still got money left, one of the things that are very close to my heart are upgrading the digital space for higher resilience against the misuse of Gen AI. So we are now in a digital space where everything can be faked, everyone can be faked, people can be invented, majorities can be simulated, inferences can be simulated, whole bubbles can be simulated. And so we have a massive crisis of trust in the digital space. A bit of media literacy, a bit of detection tools, a bit of fact-checking is not going to cut it. We need a fundamental upgrade of the digital space to make it resilient. We will never be able to get rid of the fakes and the misuse of Gen AI, but we can make the digital space resilient against it. I have managed to create a conference for this purpose, the Digital Trust Convention, which we will hold for the second time this year. But I would love to have more resources to feed into that stream of work.
Finger crossed for that. You have a couple of good causes, and you never know, there might be some investors who listen to this podcast and get hold of you afterwards. So finger crossed for that as well. Finally, our signature question. What does Beyond the Tech mean to you personally and professionally?
Technology is not a means to an end. Is not a goal in itself. It's a means to an end. And as much as I'm fascinated by many of the things that technology can do, including what an LLM can do, despite my skeptical words earlier. It's highly fascinating, but at the same time, it's a means to an end. And it only has value as a means to an end. And that's also ultimately how I would assess the value of technology. I'm kind of soft in that sense that I think we need to give technology a space to play out, to demonstrate what it can do, to bring together people who've got inspiring ideas on what can be done with technology like you're doing. But ultimately, it always has to be, what good can we do with it?
Absolutely. Well, it has been an incredible interview, Sebastian. I really enjoyed, and I hope that our listeners will enjoy too. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sebastian Hallensleben, thank you.
Thank you.